Mitsuri, all the way to children being enslaved, tortured, or even cases where they had to kill their own family members. Some backstories in Demon Slayer are so brutal, it will send chills down your spine. I mean, which backstory do you think is worse, Akaza's or Sanemi's? Damn, Obanai's is insane as well. These are the 30 saddest backstories in Demon Slayer, ranked from least all the way to the saddest ones. For example, when you think of happy backstories in Demon Slayer, well, to be honest, there aren't many of them out there. However, the first that comes to mind is, of course, Mitsuri's. As a child, Mitsuri Kanroji was born with an abnormal muscle density, making her incredibly strong despite her delicate appearance. She grew up in a loving family. She was fed well, and quite honestly, the only inconvenience she had was that she could not find someone to marry. You see, she had an enormous appetite and unnatural strength, which caused her to stand out and be rejected by potential suitors. Heartbroken after being told she would never marry unless she became more quote-unquote normal, she dyed her hair black and suppressed her true self, hiding her strength just to fit in. Despite this pain, she later chose to embrace who she really was and joined the Demon Slayer Corps, where her uniqueness was celebrated, not shamed. Now, this was just level 0, and well, let's just say that as we keep ascending the levels, the backstories keep getting sadder and sadder. Now, let's move on to level 1, beginning with Zenitsu. Well, for him, I'd say the tragic thing from his backstory was pretty much his fault to begin with, as let's face it, that's what happens when you're an incurable simp. You see, Zenitsu fell into massive debts because of his soft nature. He was taken advantage of by women, which caused him to accumulate a debt that would be around 600,000 yen in modern currency, or about 4,000 USD. And I know this doesn't sound like a lot, but believe me, back in the day, aka the time period Demon Slayer takes place in, this was a lot. And I mean a lot. This massive amount of debt came from his 7 ex-girlfriends. Despite all of them being beautiful, they treated Zenitsu like a slave, tricked him, as well as robbed him of his money. Zenitsu also never got to even hold their hands. Damn, bro, get a hint. Stop being a simp. But talking about people that were responsible for their own downfall, well, here we should talk about Hantengu next. Even as a child, Hantengu was a frequent liar who deflected blame towards him onto anyone else. Whenever something happened, he would play the part of the victim and did anything he could in order to make others around him look bad as a way to gain sympathy. Throughout most of his adult life, Hantengu committed many heinous crimes. He stole from people, murdered a lot of them, all while claiming that he was innocent, even once claiming that his hands alone were solely to blame for his actions, thus hinting that he was also mentally unstable and delusional due to his claims. He was even married several times and had children, but falsely believed he was being mistreated and killed his many wives and children in retaliation. He was eventually caught and sentenced to death before Muzan found him and turned him into a demon. And yet these two were not the only ones responsible for their downfall. Let's talk about Michikatsu next. Michikatsu Sugikuni, later known as Kokushibo, was the twin brother of Yoriichi, with Michikatsu being born just a few seconds before Yoriichi, thus making him the legitimate heir to his father's titles. Born into a samurai family, Michikatsu was originally the favorite child, both because he was born earlier, but also because Yoriichi featured a birthmark that was considered a bad omen back then. As time passed, however, and Yoriichi started displaying his immense natural talent, Michikatsu snapped. Despite training hard, Michikatsu could never surpass his brother. As he aged and faced mortality, fear consumed him. He couldn't bear the thought of dying while Yoriichi remained perfect. In desperation, he accepted Muzan's offer to become a demon, gaining power and immortality, but at the cost of his humanity and family. He lived centuries in regret, haunted by the fact that he would never surpass his brother, even in death. A tragic fact about him was some power-ups like Selfless State could only be achieved if Michikatsu actually stopped being jealous of his brother. But speaking about Upper Moon demons, let's talk about Rui now. Born as a sickly child, Rui could barely walk or breathe, and his parents loved and cared for him deeply despite his fragile nature. One day, Muzan found him and turned him into a demon, giving him a powerful body, aka what Rui always wanted. But when Rui killed and ate a human, his horrified parents tried to kill him to stop the monster he had become. He killed both of his parents and sat outside his home, reflecting on his and their actions. He recalls hearing a story about a man who drowned to save his son and how he was moved by the act of parental love. He reasoned that because his parents tried to kill him, they must have been imposters. However, as his mother lay dying, Rui overheard her apologizing for not being able to give him a healthy body, which then caused him to remember his father's last words, promising that both he and his wife would follow Rui to the afterlife by killing themselves. In an attempt to fill the emotional void, Rui created a twisted family of demons, forcing them into roles under threat and abuse. And hold on, because family drama in Demon Slayer is way more common than you think. For example, Kagaya Ubuyashiki is the epitome of family drama in Demon Slayer. Kagaya was born into the Ubuyashiki clan. As a male born into the family, he was cursed to suffer an illness illness that slowly affected his entire body due to Muzan Kibutsuji's blood relation with the clan. His father, the previous family head, was a sensitive man who committed suicide at the age of 19, and Kagaya was only 4 when this happened. One day, Kagaya's sister Senri set fire to the mansion to commit suicide and forced their youngest brother, Akito, to join him. Their mother would try to rescue them, but she fell to the flames as well. And all of that because of Muzan's curse. Truth be told, however, Muzan did have a pretty harsh backstory as well. He was born with a constant struggle to survive. His heart stopped multiple times at his mother's womb, and when he first entered the world, he was deemed stillborn, having no pulse and not breathing. When he was taken to be cremated, he escaped death by releasing his first cries. Throughout his young life, he struggled with illnesses, and that led to his thanatophobia, aka his obsession with immortality once he became the Demon King. As a young man, Muzan was diagnosed with a disease that would kill him before he reached the age of 20, but as we know, the experimental treatment of the doctor turned him into a demon instead. His entire life was full of agonizing pain, struggle, and fear of death. So yeah, I'd say he did have a pretty sad backstory too. But then again, Muzan's worst nightmare had a pretty tragic backstory as well. You see, Yoriichi did not have it so easy, despite basically being the strongest in his verse, by quite a big margin too. Yoriichi had access to transparent world from birth, and as a result, he could see within people, like an X-ray, and thus he could see his mother's sickness that made her left side weaker. He always stood by her side in order to aid her, even if the people around thought that Yoriichi was just afraid to leave his mom's side instead. When Yoriichi was 7, his mother died due to her illness, and yet his sufferings were only just getting started. One day, Yoriichi went outside the house for some errands, where he was supposed to return by nightfall. On his way back, however, he encountered an old man and decided to help, but he wasted so much time that he ended up coming back after nightfall. By then, the sun had already set. When he finally arrived home, he found that his wife Uta, along with his unborn child, had been killed by a demon. The tragedy shocked Yoriichi so much that he held her corpse in his arms for 10 days straight and buried them after a pursuing demon slayer encouraged him to do so. This led Yoriichi to pick up his blade again and train as a demon slayer. If that were not enough, Yoriichi in his old age encountered his brother, now a full-blown demon, which obviously shattered him even more. But talking about demon slayers and mother deaths, Inosuke's case was also pretty tragic. You see, as a baby, he was taken by his kind and loving mother, Kotoha, while fleeing from her abusive husband. Seeking refuge, she unknowingly found shelter within the cult led by Doma, one of the 12 Kizuki. When Kotoha discovered Doma's true nature, aka eating his followers, she tried to escape with baby Inosuke. In a desperate act of final love, she dropped him into a river below a cliff to save him from Doma's grasp, sacrificing her own life in the process. Inosuke survived, but grew up alone in the wild, raised by boars, with no knowledge of his name, family, or humanity. He was forced to become savage to survive, and though he puts on a front of pride and aggression, the truth is, he's a boy who lost everything before he could even understand what he had. But speaking of people losing everything, Sakonji Urokodaki's case was also tragic. I mean, Sakonji kept losing many of his students to demons, one after the other, especially to the demon Hand Demon during final selection, which left him burdened with guilt and sorrow. Despite this, he never stopped believing in the potential for good, even in a demon, making him one of the few who truly understood Tanjiro's mission. But well, let's face it, not all demons had the most understanding backstories. Some of them, well, they were a bit psycho. For example, Nakime was an obscure amateur biwa musician struggling to make ends meet. The man she married to was hopelessly addicted to gambling, who squandered her earnings and savings while contributing nothing to improve their lives. One night, she was scheduled to play her biwa at a particular stage, but discovered that her husband stole her only kimono that she used for biwa performances and gambled it away. Enraged, Nakime murdered her husband using a hammer. Shortly after she killed her husband, Nakime realized that the appointed time to play was fast approaching, and she was forced to wear a worn-out, tattered kimono. The crowd did not appreciate her shabby looks and gave her disapproving looks. With the traumatic sensation of committing murder for the first time still fresh in her mind, her hands shook in nervousness as she played her biwa. But surprisingly, the sound coming from the biwa as Nakime played with utmost tension was so beautiful that her audience loved her performance and shouted for an encore. Both her customers and the stage owner were pleased with the unexpected outcome, and Nakime was paid handsomely. Since then, Nakime developed a disturbing habit of killing people before performing for large audiences. And for the final point before we start getting more serious, even more disturbing and sad backstories, we have Makio, Suma, and Hinatsuru. They were raised in the strict shinobi tradition, where emotions were often suppressed and death was expected. They were raised to serve and die if needed, and many people around them died. After all, in the environment they were raised, failure meant death. This was just level 1. And get ready, because the most depressing backstories are yet to be revealed. We now move on to level 2. A small note, this part will be mostly filled with Hashira backstories, but we do have a couple demon backstories as well. For example, Doma. You see, Doma is probably the most misunderstood case in Demon Slayer. He suffered from a psychological condition that turned him clinically apathetic. But did you ever wonder why this came to be? Yeah, his childhood was indeed really messed up. When he was 5, his mother murdered his father for cheating and then killed herself, all in front of child Doma. Doma just sat there unmoved, thinking the room would need to be cleaned because it smelled like blood. Even though some think that Doma felt nothing, this was actually not true. What ended up happening was that Doma became the way he was exactly because of that event. Seeing such a traumatic experience, Doma's brain used its only defense mechanism to save Doma from going crazy.
What is going on inside their head?
Turning him apathetic, unable to feel or experience any emotion from here onwards. At the end of the day, the only thing Doma wanted as a kid was to be loved. He never had someone that truly showed him love besides the people in his cult that showed him love only out of fear, which fits Doma's character perfectly, as this fake emotion of love he received is the same type of fake emotions he displayed later on in life as a demon. But well, since we mentioned Doma, how about we go to Shinobu now, since, you know, they share a connection. Okay, so as a child, Shinobu lived peacefully with her older sister Kane until a demon attacked and slaughtered their family. The two sisters survived and became demon slayers, vowing to prevent others from experiencing the same pain. Kane was Shinobu's guiding light, gentle, kind, and always hopeful, even toward demons. But that light was extinguished when Upper Moon 2, Doma, killed Kane right before Shinobu's eyes. That loss changed Shinobu forever. Though she maintained a cheerful, soft-spoken demeanor, it became a mask, hiding the seething hatred and sorrow that consumed her. And that's exactly what makes her fight against Doma even more tragic. And yet Shinobu was not the only one who lost a sibling early on in life, because Muichiro experiences something similar. Muichiro and his older twin brother Yuichiro were born to a woodcutter and his wife. When they were 10 years old, their mother caught a cold, which developed into bronchitis, eventually killing her. Their father, who had gone to fetch medicinal herbs for their mother during a storm, ended up falling off a cliff to his death. The two orphaned siblings survived together, with Muichiro taking after the emotional and kind nature of their father. Contrary to him, Yuichiro held a cold and impassive outlook on life, embittered by his parents' unnecessary deaths. In the following summer, when the twins were 11, a demon arrived at their cabin during the night and attacked, resulting in Yuichiro losing his left arm while trying to protect Muichiro. As the demon insulted and taunted them for their worthlessness, Muichiro lost himself in a rage and attacked the demon with all the tools at their disposal. By sunrise, the demon withered into ash, and Muichiro dragged himself back to the house. There, he found Yuichiro near death, praying to the heavens that his brother might survive. He laid next to his brother and grasped his hand as he passed away. Afterwards, Muichiro would lose his memories and leave his old life behind to serve the Demon Slayer Corps. With his memories gone, Muichiro began taking after his older twin brother's personality and became aloof and indifferent. However, he always felt an incredible anger deep inside of him, which drove him to hunt demons. Someone who was exactly the opposite now, aka always calm, happy, and composed, was Rengoku. But that does not mean his backstory was all about sunshine and rainbows. Born into a family of flame Hashira, Kyojiro was raised on the ideals of strength and protecting the weak. His mother, Ruka, instilled in him a deep sense of responsibility and kindness before she passed away from illness. Her final words, "Those who are strong must protect those who are not," became the core of his being. After her death, his father, Shinjiro, a former flame Hashira himself, fell into grief and alcohol, becoming cold, dismissive, probably abusive towards his children as well. Yet Kyojiro never let bitterness touch his heart. He trained hard, became the flame Hashira, and smiled brightly for everyone around him, even as he faced battles alone and without his father's support. Rengoku always saw the good in people, unlike Gyomei, who can't see at all.
Oh, nah, I ain't seen nothing. I ain't seen nothing.
You see, Gyomei also had a tragic backstory. Born blind and orphaned, Gyomei was taken in by a temple, where he lived peacefully while raising 9 orphaned children. He was gentle, devout, and kind, protecting them with nothing but his strength and presence. But one night, everything changed when a demon attacked. One of the children, frightened and naive, betrayed them by breaking the temple's demon-repelling wards. This child was, after all, Kaigaku, as we later found out. the demon slaughtered the others while Gyomei fought to protect them, using only his bare hands and prayer beads. He managed to kill the demon as dawn broke, but when the authorities arrived, they blamed him for the massacre. Condemned as a murderer, Gyomei sat on death row until Kagaya Ubuyashiki intervened and saw the truth in him. From there, Gyomei joined the Demon Slayer Corps and became a Hashira. Gyomei also took in a close student, Genya, but well, his backstory wasn't easy either. Genya grew up in an abusive household with 5 siblings. His father was violent, and his mother tried her best to protect her children. One night, however, she didn't return home, and later that night, she did come back, but as a demon. She killed several of Genya's siblings right in front of him. In the chaos, Genya watched his older brother, Sanemi, kill their demon-turned mother with his own hands to protect them. But in his shock and pain, Genya lashed out at Sanemi, calling him a murderer. The moment tore them apart, but in reality, neither of them stopped caring about the other. Losing your siblings sucks, right? Well, ask Tengen. He lost 9 of them. Born into a brutal shinobi clan, Tengen and his siblings were raised to be killers, with no identity beyond mission and obedience. 3 of the 9 children died before they even reached 10 years old due to overzealous training. With the remaining 6 of his siblings, they were forced to kill each other on their father's orders without them knowing who they fought, as their heads and faces were covered with masks. Tengen realized his father's trick only after he had killed 2 of his brothers. By the age of 15, 7 of his siblings had already died, leaving only him and his younger brother, who's 2 years his younger. His brother had embraced their father's cold ideology, while Tengen rejected it entirely. He later joined the Demon Slayer Corps and vowed to fight with flamboyance, heart, and a code of honor. Tengen was a proud demon slayer, unlike Giyu now, who felt dishonored, ashamed, and lowered himself as a fraud. As a child, Giyu lost his sister when she sacrificed herself to protect him from a demon, but when he tried to tell others what happened, no one believed him. They thought he was delusional and sent him to a clinic. He escaped and later trained to become a demon slayer, driven by guilt and the belief that he should have been the one to die instead. During final selection, he was saved by Sabito, a fellow trainee who fought off nearly all the demons alone to protect the others, only to be killed in the process. Giyu survived, but it felt like another stolen life, another death that should have been his. That guilt followed him for years, shaping him into the distant, stoic water Hashira. He often pushes people away, convinced he doesn't deserve to be called a Hashira, let alone praised. And for the last point of level 2, before we get really serious, Tamayo. Over 400 years ago, she was an ordinary woman with a husband and children, until she fell ill. In her desperation, she accepted help from Muzan Kibutsuji, who turned her into a demon. But instead of curing her, he cursed her with an endless hunger for human flesh. In her early demon years, she lost herself completely, devouring her own family and countless others, drowning in guilt and horror once she regained her mind. Consumed by remorse, Tamayo spent centuries trying to atone, and dedicated her life to finding a cure for demonhood. Unlike other demons, she refused to harm humans, relying only on small amounts of donated blood to survive. She used her brilliant medical knowledge and her own cursed condition to help others, eventually becoming a key ally to Tanjiro and Nezuko. And now, the moment you've been waiting for, level 3. If you didn't cry yet, well, prepare to do so now, because we're moving on to the top tier of sad backstories. For example, when you're talking about the saddest backstory in Demon Slayer, well, for many, this is none other than Akaza's. Hear this. As a human, he was known as Hakuji, a boy born into poverty who stole in order to afford the medicine his sick father needed. But when his father found out, he took his own life rather than be a burden or even force his son to commit crimes in order for him to survive, leaving Hakuji devastated. Eventually, Hakuji was taken in by a kind martial arts master and fell in love with his daughter, Koyuki. For the first time, he had a purpose and a family. Just as things seemed to turn out for the better, tragedy struck again. Koyuki and her father were poisoned by a rival dojo out of jealousy. Hakuji lost everything he had fought to protect, and in his rage, he slaughtered the rival school with his bare hands. Amazed by what just happened, Muzan found him broken, furious, perfect for demonhood. At the start, Muzan even thought that this was the work of a demon and not a human. That's the kind of massacre Akaza left behind him, and that's how broken he really was. But then again, many claim that Obanai's backstory was even worse. Born into a twisted clan that worshipped a serpent demon, Obanai was the first male child born in 370 years. Because of this, he was treated as a gift for the demon, locked in a cage, isolated from the world, and fed only enough to survive. The clan raised him to be an offering, even carving his mouth into a permanent slit to resemble a snake. takes. At just 12 years old, Obanai realized the horror of his situation and escaped, but not before the demon slaughtered his entire family, except for one cousin who blamed him for everything. This left him with immense survivor's guilt and a belief that his life came at the cost of others. Something similar was Kanao's life as well. As a child, she was born into a brutally abusive household where neglect and violence were her norm. Starved, beaten, and treated as less than human, she eventually became so traumatized that she shut down emotionally, unable to speak, make decisions, or even react to pain. She was sold into slavery, treated like property, and her spirit was nearly erased. Her life changed when Kane and Shinobu Kocho found her. The two sisters rescued her, brought her to the butterfly estate, and gave her a chance to live freely. But even then, Kanao was too broken to choose for herself. So Shinobu gave her a coin, telling her to flip it whenever she couldn't decide, hoping she'd eventually find the strength to trust her own heart. Okay, we previously mentioned Genya, but how about his brother Sanemi? Because let me tell you, he did have it even worse. Born into an abusive home, Sanemi took it upon himself to protect his younger siblings, especially Genya, like a second parent. When their father was finally gone, it seemed like peace might come, but fate had other plans. One night, their mother didn't return home. When she finally did, she was as a demon, and no longer their mother, basically. Sanemi fought her off with everything he had, ultimately killing her to protect his siblings. But in the chaos, Genya, too young to understand, saw Sanemi standing over their mother's body and accused him of murder. That moment shattered their bond and left Sanemi to carry the weight of both survival and blame. And even more than that, the only sibling he managed to save was Genya, who in his mind hated him as well. As we've mentioned, sibling dynamics and drama are indeed a common pattern in Demon Slayer, and a prime example is of course Taki and Gyutaro. Gyutaro was born disfigured, unwanted, and starving, mocked and abused simply for existing. His only form of happiness came when his baby sister Ume, later known as Daki, was born. She was beautiful, lively, and everything Gyutaro wasn't, but instead of resenting her, he adored her. He became her protector, her provider, and in a twisted world, her only family. Together, they scraped by. Gyutaro as a debt collector, Ume working her way into the courtesan world. But just when it seemed they might finally escape their suffering, tragedy struck. Ume was brutally burned alive by a samurai after stabbing him in defense, and Gyutaro found her dying body only to be ambushed and left to die as well. Bleeding and broken, he cursed the world, and the one who answered? Muzan. The siblings became demons together, clinging to each other for survival. And for the final characters of level 3, we left the protagonists for last, Tanjiro and Nezuko. They were part of a humble, kind family living peacefully in the mountains. Tanjiro is the eldest son who worked hard to support his mother and younger siblings. But one snowy day, everything changed. While Tanjiro was away selling charcoal, a demon attacked his home and slaughtered his entire family. Only Nezuko survived, but she had been turned into a demon. Instead of killing her, Tanjiro tried to save her with everything he had, especially when Giyu showed up ready to kill her. Thus, once Nezuko displayed consciousness of her own, Tanjiro vowed to turn her back into a human, no matter what it took. That single promise basically fueled everything we see in Demon Slayer right now. Click on this video next, where I'm explaining what would happen if Zenitsu